Hey, everybody, and welcome to Galactic Wisdom. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. So today we're going to talk about consciousness. And in order to start off the subject of consciousness, it helps if we understand a little bit about spirits and where spirits come from, because our consciousnesses are not just housed by our biological bodies. Our consciousnesses are also housed by our spiritual bodies and our spiritual brains. I'm going to move my camera around a little bit so I can see my screen a little clearer. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about spirits, and then we're going to move on to consciousness. Now, consciousness is a very important subject, and it's a subject that people talk a lot about in the paranormal realm, in the realm of alien research. And I think it's widely misunderstood what consciousness is and how it connects to other paranormal activities. So I am going to go into this subject in quite a lot of depth for you now. Now, a basic law of reality is that nothing changes its motion or its direction unless a force acts upon it. We're talking about Newton's laws of motion here. And those are good, solid laws that work and that make sense. For example, without the attractive force of gravity acting between the Earth and the Sun, the Earth would fly off in a straight line into space. All of the planets would fly off in straight lines into space if the Sun's gravity turned off. So what is it that causes the planets to move, to change their direction in a curve in their orbital paths? It is a force. It is a gravitational force. So what is it that forces our spirits also not to fly off in straight lines into space? What is it that forces our spirits to curve around with us when we orbit around the sun? What is it when I move my hand up and down that causes my spirit hand to move up and down with my biological hand? If I get up and walk into the next room, I don't leave my spirit behind sitting in this chair. There are forces on spirits. There are forces between spiritual matter and physical matter. Now, as a space scientist, as a scientist in general, this is the kind of thing that I observe, that I bring into paranormal research, that other people may not notice. But it's very clear to me that between our spiritual bodies and our physical bodies, there is some kind of an interdimensional force. I call it the interdimensional force. It's an attractive force between our spirits and our biological bodies that keep them together. In a similar way that electric forces attract electrons into protons so that the atoms around us have electrons and protons in them, and they naturally neutralize out. So you generally have the same number of electrons in an atom as you do protons. There is something very similar going on between physical matter and spiritual matter, which I don't call matter. In fact, it might actually be antimatter, because most of the antimatter that's supposed to be in the universe is missing. Maybe it's in ultra-dimensional spaces. Maybe it's the stuff that our spirits are made out of. But I call that spiritual substance corether. It's named after somebody I used to know who was very psychic, Carina, and also out after the word ether. Scientists used to speculate that light, when it traveled through space, was traveling through an ether. And they thought that because when they realized that light had wave-like properties, and they realized that waves typically travel through a certain medium, like the air or like water, they speculated that throughout the vacuum of space, there was this thing called ether. Turns out that that's not necessary, but I like the word, so my word for extra-dimensional or ultra-dimensional spiritual stuff is corether. So between our physical matter and our spiritual choretha, there is a force holding our spirit in place where our biological bodies are. Choretha is an ultra-dimensional substance that spirits are made out of. And I theorize that it's the antimatter, the missing antimatter. I don't know that to be true, but it's a theory that sort of holds up to a few tests because antimatter and regular matter are they're pretty much the same. They look the same. They have the same masses, but they have opposite electric charges. Now, that opposite electric charge could be the interdimensional force, the electric charge between an electron and a positron holding them together. That would be an electric force. That could be the interdimensional force. Also, when we encounter spiritual phenomena like ghosts, what do investigators usually register or take with them? Electric or magnetic field detectors. And I personally have witnessed that happening. There's an electromagnetic field associated with spirits or with other paranormal phenomena. And it could well be that if you have antimatter coming close to you in ultra-dimensional spaces, that sets up a potential difference, an EMF across dimensions, and you're able to register that. So, but it doesn't really matter. We don't really need to understand exactly what choretha is to see clearly it is attracted to matter. Now, when the embryo of a human being is developing, the molecules of physical matter that come together gradually, that are building these new cells that are coming in and being and connecting to the growing embryo, those physical molecules, they're not alone. They have already around them in ultra-dimensional space spiritual molecules made out of choretha. Now, that might sound a little bit weird to talk about a molecule having basically a spirit. I'm not implying that those molecules are alive. I'm not implying that those molecules are conscious. I'm simply implying that because of this interdimensional attractive force, it's not just on living conscious spirits, it's on all matter and all choretha, including down to the atomic, the molecular, and the subatomic levels. So for example, any molecule of air that's floating around in front of us, so O2, two oxygen molecules joined together, they would have a corresponding chorethereal or spiritual oxygen molecule in the spiritual realm around them. That's what fits with observations of paranormal realities. And so as this embryo is coming, the molecules are coming together, building up, making the embryo larger. The embryo is growing in the physical realm, and around it, intertwined within it and through it, is a spiritual embryo, spiritual molecules, spiritual cells and tissues coming together. And so a spirit is growing with the biological body. That is consistent with reality. I know it's not consistent with a lot of people's beliefs, but listen, look at the history of beliefs. We've got a lot of them wrong in the past, and I can tell you we're getting a lot of them wrong still today. So as the physical embryo grows, a spiritual embryo grows around it. What do I mean by around it? Well, if you imagine a sheet of paper, and that sheet of paper is, well, it's a two-dimensional realm, and imagine that a ball, a ping pong ball maybe, is somehow within the plane of that paper. That ping pong ball could be seen by any beings that existed in the realm of the two-dimensional plane of paper, they would see it as circular, but in fact it's three-dimensional in this analogy. So if they could see out of the realm of the paper, they would see that it has ultra dimensions of space. Ultra meaning extending beyond, out of. We could say ultra dimensional, or we could say extra dimensional. But that ping pong ball is still in the plane of the paper, like it passes through it. So in a similar way, our spirits pass through us. It is true to say that our spirits are within us from that perspective, but it's also true to say that our spirits extend beyond us, like that ping pong ball, out of our thin film of reality. And so every single point within us has spirit within it, around it, and through it, and extending beyond it. It's more accurate to say that our biological bodies are within our spirits rather than the other way around. But it doesn't really matter too much. I'm digressing a little bit. So let's see. All living organisms have spiritual bodies that match their corresponding bodies in almost every detail. So it's every molecule, every cell, every piece of dust, whatever is here. I've got a piece of trash here. This also has spiritual molecules around it that are attracted to it. All of our biological cells have corresponding spiritual cells around them. All of our organs have corresponding spiritual organs around them. We all have spiritual hands, feet, brains, hearts, and hair. That is why when living people see the spirits of departed people, ghosts perhaps, or departed friends and family who come to visit them, when we see people like that, the spirits look like how the people used to look. And it's more than just visual, because often, especially with mediums can sense the feeling, the well-being, the state of well-being of those spirits. And if those people, when they died, had a bad leg or something, often those spirits can feel that. They can feel that there's an issue with the spirit still. This simple fact that there is a match between visually what the person looked like when they died and what they look like when they're a spirit is very important, and we should hold on to that idea. And it's not just true for adults, it's also true for children. I personally have communicated during paranormal investigations and contact activities, alien contact activities, with human spirits that have come along, and they have been all different ages. Some of them have been adult, some of them have been children. Also animals. My old pet dog, Gemma, who was a wonderful cardigan corgi back when I was, I guess she died probably when I was in my early 20s, but she comes and visits me every once in a while. She's still out there, and when I see her, I see a dog. And she has been seen by medium friends who have been around me. They describe her to me. The dog, the spirit of the dog looks like the dog, the actual biological dog. That is all consistent with our spirits growing with our biological bodies. That's what reality tells us. That's what the evidence is. Now, I know that's inconsistent with different people's beliefs, but you know, as I have written down somewhere recently in a book that I'm writing, when reality is inconsistent with our beliefs, it's not reality that's wrong. It's not reality that's incorrect. It's our beliefs. Unfortunately, people have a hard time with that, and they try and make reality what they want it to be. So, let's see. Sorry, I'm following my notes here, and I tend to skip ahead. So this simple fact that spirits match their biological bodies proves that spirits grow with their biological bodies. And as I said, this is inconsistent with people's beliefs. And this is where the faith that many people have in their beliefs becomes an obstacle to enlightenment. Faith is basically holding firm to one's beliefs, regardless of what information and reality and evidence is out there, regardless of what other people say. It's a holding firm to your beliefs and not questioning them. And if you do that, you're not going to end up forming a picture of reality that is real. All you're going to do is form a picture of reality that's consistent with your beliefs and with your faith. So you're not going to become enlightened. The facts tell us that spirits are created with their biological bodies. The facts tell us that our spirits are not created by anyone. Spirits aren't placed fully formed into empty biological vessels before birth. Okay, sorry, something weird happened to my screen then and I froze. I don't know if I froze for you too, but it could be that I have entities around me. That wouldn't be uncommon. The spirits of babies. So when a biological baby dies, what comes out of that baby is not like a human adult that was previously reincarnated into that baby. What comes out of that baby, and what mothers see and what I have seen when we connect with those spirits, is the spirit of a baby. There isn't any interspecies spirit jumping. And I know this goes against the beliefs of some belief systems, but our spirits were not once inside insects. When we die, our spirits are not sometime in the future going to go into a frog or a crocodile or a seagull. That sort of thing isn't consistent with reality. It might make for a very harmonious and clean story within a belief system, but it doesn't match with reality. Now, a very small percentage of living humans who do seem to have some limited memories of real past lives, they do exist. I have seen documented cases of people who, mostly children, who have very strong memories, and sometimes even more than that, they have even biological components that seem to fit with a previous life. Those are relatively rare. It's a very small percentage of the population that have them, but we can't dismiss them. They do mean something. Now, people, because of things like that, they consider that very strong evidence for reincarnation. And it is strong evidence for reincarnation. It's not proof of reincarnation. It's strong evidence for reincarnation. But there is stronger evidence that reincarnation isn't true, because most people don't have those past life memories, unless you go searching for them in quantum hypnosis, regressional stuff, and that's just like astral projection and remote viewing that takes you to what you want to find. I will talk about reincarnation at another time, maybe if I have time later today, but that's not where I'm going with this. We can't dismiss that reincarnation stuff, but right now I'm going to tell you that that's not typically what happens. The natural, stable state of all matter is to have an equivalent amount of core ether around it. So it's not just living organisms that have spiritual components. Everything does. Rocks have rock-shaped core ethereal structures around them. Spoons do. Oh, that's handy. Visual aid. This spoon has a core ethereal spoon spiritual structure to it. It's not conscious. It's not complex enough to be conscious. It's not living. Again, not complex enough to be living. It certainly doesn't grow and reproduce, but it does have spiritual structure within it. One of the things that supports that is proper Kirlian photography, which kind of has moved out of fashion a bit, because if you go to paranormal fairs, there are people who have aura photograph equipment. You can photograph your auras. That's sort of a cheat. That's not actually photographing the aura. That's That's a computer algorithm building an aura based on electrical impulses around your hands. That's a cheat. That's not like Kirlian photography. But Kirlian photography on something like the spoon would verify that this has a spiritual component to it. So let's see. Let's see. What is consciousness? Let's get into this consciousness question now. What is consciousness? Consciousness is the state of being aware. Being aware of something. It doesn't matter what you're aware of. If you're aware of anything at all, if you're aware of listening to my words, then you are conscious of my words. You're conscious of hearing my words, and you have consciousness. That's what a consciousness is. It is something that is aware. Often people talk about consciousness as being self-aware. Well, that's probably one of the first things they're aware of, but it doesn't have to be. They could be aware of light that's coming in through some kind of a sensory organ, sensory input into them. They could be aware of that light, but not consciously sort of think it through that, oh, I must be aware. I think, therefore I am. They might not be that advanced. If anybody is aware of anything, then they're conscious. Now, if I meet somebody in the street, I can't prove that they're conscious. You can't prove that I'm conscious. This could all be some wild computer simulation in the Matrix. I don't think it is, but you can't prove that stuff. The only being that you can prove is conscious, is yourself, if you're aware of stuff. Now, the ability to sense or detect something doesn't necessarily mean that the sensor or the detector is conscious. For example, a security camera outside of somebody's home might be able to sense or detect, or maybe see, if we could use that word, a visitor approaching the home. But the fact that they can detect that doesn't mean that the security camera is conscious. It could be that in response to a visitor approaching a home, a security camera will register that, will detect it, and then a computer chip will cause a light to be turned on. A security light will light up the intruder, the visitor, so that they can be seen more clearly, and maybe it will deter them. But all of that stuff doesn't mean, all of those responses, the responses to stimuli, doesn't mean that the security camera is aware or conscious of anything. It's just following like basic laws of physics. Something does this and then something does that. Just like dominoes, you knock over one domino and the other dominoes fall over due to gravity and natural forces and electrostatic forces when the dominoes hit each other and so forth. It doesn't mean that the domino pattern is or was conscious at any time. A plant, like a growing green chlorophyll plant, might be able to detect sunlight and open up the petals on its flowers when it's sunny. The leaves might be able to follow the sun as the sun moves around. But that does not mean that the plant is conscious. Consciousness requires something more than merely sensing, detecting, or using physical forces in order to respond to stimuli. Consciousness requires an awareness of what is being sensed or detected. Now, we can learn actually a lot about consciousness from how the consciousnesses of humans are affected by injuries. At the moment, I'm not giving you much evidence to support what I'm saying about consciousnesses. I might be right, I might be wrong, but there is a lot of evidence out there to support what I'm talking about. If an accident occurs in which a person, let's say, loses a finger, the person's consciousness is not affected. Sure, they might be traumatized, they might be upset, they might have to go to therapy, or, they might have a really hard time emotionally, but their consciousness basically remains the same. They are the same person. with the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same motivations, the same hopes and desires, the same personality characteristics. A person could lose a kidney, a lung, a leg, an ear, an eye. All different parts of their bodies could be lost, and they still remain the same person. Their consciousness stays the same. Their awareness stays the same. Now, we don't think of the severed finger or the cut out kidney or lung or, an arm that is lost or an eye that is lost. We don't think of those usually as having consciousness. Like if we cut our hair, we don't pick up the hair and think, oh no, I've cut a conscious being in half. And then if you take one of those hairs and you snip it in half, it's not like, oh no, I've done something terrible, homicidal. I've just cut a piece of conscious hair in half. Our fingernails are not, our fingernail clippings, when we clip them off, those are not conscious. When we lose dust, skin cells from the surface of our skin, they're dead. They're not conscious. The thing that is conscious in a human body is the brain. And we know that a person can lose pretty much any part of their body. And if there's good enough medics standing around, doctors, nurses, they can be saved. But if a person loses their brain, no, they've lost their consciousness. And in cases where the brain is damaged, but doesn't actually die, the person remains alive with a damaged brain. The person's thoughts and feelings and personality, their personality traits, the characteristics of their consciousness, if the brain is damaged, those things are often changed. There's been thousands of years of people getting brain damage to see the effect that damaging the brain in different ways, see how it affects our consciousness. This is all proved stuff. This is scientifically proved stuff. I've seen documentaries where people who have been having seizures and serious problems with their brains, doctors have tried different types of brain surgery, like severing down the middle the left and the right hemispheres. If you sever down the middle the left and the right hemispheres, it can stop certain seizures from happening. I'm not a medical expert, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. But those people have often then reported that severing the brain in half has resulted in them having two separate consciousnesses. And sometimes those consciousnesses are in conflict with each other. Their identities are in conflict with each other, and one of their hands can reach out to pick up one food or drink item to consume, when the other hand is reaching out for something entirely different, and there's like a conflict there. Our brain is where consciousness lies. That's provable. At least it's provable that that's where it's rooted. That's where it's housed. And we should remember that when we hear things that go against our beliefs, because that's reality. And our beliefs, beliefs are things that haven't been proved. That's why they're beliefs and not knowledge. So we need to, it's wise, it's healthy, it is correct intellectually to just hold on to the idea that our beliefs might not be correct. So let's see. Our brains provide the specific, complex, neurological, physical structures that are required to house or generate our consciousnesses. They're structures that exist in our brain, but they're structures that don't exist within our fingers, our kidneys, our lungs, our legs, our ears, our eyes, or hair, or toenail clippings. And so it is true to say that all of those other things, apart from our brain, they're not conscious. They don't have the required structure. However, those structures do exist within our spiritual brains. Because let's go back to how our spirits formed. Our spirits grew. One coethereal molecule at a time with our biological bodies. Every cell within our biological body has a corresponding spiritual cell. Every molecule has a corresponding spiritual molecule. Every neuron within our brains has a corresponding spiritual neuron. Our brains are replicated intricately and perfectly by our spirit. That structure, the same structures in our physical brains that hold our memories, our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, our knowledge, our abilities, our hopes, our dreams, our personalities, and all of our consciousness characteristics, those same structures exist in our spiritual brains. And that is how, when our biological brains die, every aspect of our own unique personal consciousnesses, from our memories to our senses of humor, continue to exist, supported not by our biological brains, which are dying and starting to decay straight away, but they're supported by the coethereal structure of our spiritual brains. All organisms that have brains or sufficiently complex neural networks have consciousnesses. That includes the vast majority of animals, from jellyfish to butterflies, from worms to gorillas. Yep. This is the moment where I pause because I've been joined by somebody. Welcome. I don't know who you are, but thank you for being here with me. So let's think about that a little bit. We can prove, science has proved, medical science has proved that our brain, that's where consciousness lies. That's the thing that if it gets damaged enough, our consciousness is gone, or at least moved on to somewhere else. So what we can do is we can look for those structures in other organisms. What other organisms have those structures? Because if they do have comparable structures, then they have comparable spiritual brains, they have comparable consciousnesses. Now, they might not be as intelligent as humans if they're non-human animals, but that doesn't mean they're not conscious. Anybody that has a pet knows that those pets are conscious. Animals, all vertebrates are conscious beings. Dogs, cats, mammal. We've got 5 different classes of vertebrates. We've got fish, we've got amphibians, we've got reptiles, birds, mammals. All those 5 classes of vertebrates, all of them, they're all conscious beings. That is important because that's scientifically provable. It's also spiritually provable. It's empathically provable. Anybody who's psychically empathic can feel those emotions. If you're observant at all, and you look and you see animals that are suffering, you can see them crying, you can hear them screaming. You know that they're conscious too. But we can prove that all those organisms are conscious. But brains go also into non-vertebrates, invertebrates. Insects have brains, brain-like structures, neural networks, neural conglomerations. You have to go all the way back to jellyfish, where you start to have brains that are less localized when they're starting to spread out into a neural network. But that neural network is still like a brain, it's just more spread out. And so we can infer that all the way down to jellyfish, definitely there is consciousness there. Then it goes back to things like comb jellies, sea cucumber type looking things that look like sponges on the surface of often on the surface of the seafloor. They may not be conscious because they're lacking that neural complexity that we have, that other animals have, that gives them the consciousness. So they evolved something like 300 or 400 million years ago, within 500 million years, basically. Anything that evolved then doesn't have the complexity. So if we're talking about things like bacteria, for example, well, bacteria are single-celled organisms. Yes, they're alive because they can reproduce. They can take things in to consume, and they can release waste products out of them. We consider them to be alive, but they're only a single cell. Now, a neuron within our neural networks within our brains, neurons are only one cell big. You can't have a network of neurons within a single-celled organism. There are no neurons in there. There's no structure within a single cell that is complicated enough or complex enough to house a consciousness. And following similar lines of reasoning, we can conclude, even though it goes against some people's beliefs, we can conclude that the kingdom of Monera or bacteria, the kingdom of plants, the kingdom of fungi, they don't have sufficient complexity, neural complexity, or any kind of complexity in order to house a consciousness. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not alive. It doesn't mean that they can't respond to stimulus. And it doesn't mean that they're worthy of our consideration, and taking good care of, but they're not conscious. Now, when we psychically tune into plants and trees and forests and things, there is a spiritual energy. There is this glow, this complex swirling of spiritual energies, but it's not a consciousness. You can't have a conversation with them. You can sense it. If they have well-being, if their health is good, you can sense if they're dying. But it's not a consciousness that you're sensing. It's more like a life energy, a life essence. Some people believe that everything is conscious, including rocks, raindrops, plants, toenail clippings, mountains, food packaging. However, none of those objects have the structural components that are required to be aware or conscious. And so they're not. I'm going to take a sip of my hot chocolate. Thank you for your patience. Another common belief among human beings is that all life forms throughout the universe are actually one consciousness. This is a very, very common belief nowadays. And, I haven't done a lot of research, but it seems to have certainly been founded from within or in a precursor to the belief system of transcendental meditation. In transcendental meditation, which is a relatively new belief system, probably definitely within 100 years, maybe 60 years, something like that. But transcendental meditation teaches that there is just one consciousness in the universe, and we're all part of it. Now, taken literally, that belief is nonsensical and can be disproved immediately, just using a small amount of logic. I am not conscious of all of the thoughts and the feelings, the experiences and the knowledge of everybody that's watching this podcast show. I'm not conscious of that. So, and you're not conscious of what I'm thinking beyond what my thoughts are projecting through my words. You don't know what's going on in here. I don't know what's going on in your conscious minds. You don't know, none of us know what's going on in the consciousnesses of the squirrels that are outside. I've got ground squirrels and elk outside. I've got ants and I've got mosquitoes, a few of them out there. I'm not conscious of what they're conscious of. That's what consciousness is, to be conscious of something. If we're not conscious of those other consciousnesses, then we're not one consciousness. It's simple math. We've just disproved a core component of a belief system that's out there. I could do the same with other belief systems, but I don't want to upset too many people out there. But it is clear that we are not part of one consciousness. That it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit reality, no matter what you believe. People are very susceptible to just accepting things as being true if somebody out there who seems to know what they're talking about says it with enough certainty. And when everybody on the planet, or billions of people on the planet, all believe in one thing and all saying this is true, it makes it hard for a lot of people not to believe that thing. But the problem is the whole notion of belief is invalid. Accepting anything as being true based on belief and not on proof, based on a leap of faith without connecting the dots together in with direct proof, all of those beliefs are invalid. Belief is an invalid intellectual thing that a lot of people have, most people have. One of the things that I am trying to explain to people, one of the things that our non-human friends are really trying hard to explain to people, is that beliefs are invalid. And when you believe, you open yourself up to making so many mistakes. Because people believe things with such conviction that they're willing to go to war over those beliefs. They're willing to get into conflict with people over those beliefs. Beliefs cause huge amounts of conflict and pain and suffering on this planet. If we could only learn to say, you know what, I don't know. If we could only learn to say that, our levels of wisdom would skyrocket compared to what they are presently. If we could know what we know because it's been proved, and know what we don't know because it hasn't been proved, that would make our wisdom so much greater. So let's see. The more spiritually perceptive that life forms around the universe become, the more they're able to connect with each other spiritually and psychically or ultra-dimensionally. So I'm not just talking humans here, I'm talking all around the universe. All the different species that are out there, they evolve gradually to get more and more and more and more advanced. And there comes a time when they become advanced enough, when their spiritual or their psychic perceptions become great enough that they can start to perceive each other's consciousnesses. They can start to perceive ghosts or alien beings that are in ultra-dimensional spaces. At the lower end of the connection scale, this connection, this spiritual connection, at the lower end of the connection scale, life forms can feel the general emotional states of people whom they think about. Now, this sort of spiritual connection is commonly felt by humans. You probably have felt that at some time in your life when you think of somebody and somehow you get an emotional pulse, an emotional bit of information that has come from them spiritually to you. Because when you thought of them, your spiritual consciousness connected with their spiritual consciousness, and you felt something. That happened to me. That's been happening to me with a friend the last 2 or 3 days. And this morning I sent them a message and I asked them, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? And they explained, no, they're not okay because there's some hard stuff that they're going through. And I said, yeah, I picked up on that. Is there anything I can do to help? That is the sort of spiritual connection that a lot of people have had. And it would not surprise me if everybody watching this podcast had felt that in their lives before. The closer you are, the stronger your spiritual connection is with somebody, the more likely you are to feel that. I know that when I've been in, for example, romantic relationships with people, all I need to do is think of them, and I know how they're thinking. I know how they're feeling. I know if they're thinking of me. And I have even felt the moment when at least one of them decided, no, they're going to break up with me. And I felt that happen. And I just knew, and I didn't even need to talk about it. I knew it had happened. You've probably experienced things like that. Hopefully not the breakup, but that emotional connection. So we can go a little higher up on the connection scale. A little higher up on the scale, life forms are able to connect spiritually or astrally in a group. For example, holding spiritual hands with each other. I do this quite a lot when I lead my meditations. I personally think that it's important for humans to overcome some of their differences and connect together in peace, in love, in friendship, spiritually. And so when I guide people in my meditations, I often invite everybody to hold hands with each other. And that's a little higher up on the scale of connectivity. That's not just sensing somebody's emotions out there in the distance. That is spiritually touching them, connecting with them. Such groups of people who are connecting in that way, such groups, or we can call them collections of connected spirits, they are basic collectives. A collection of spirits, they're collectives. Collections of beings who are functioning more as a group than as individuals. In sociology on this planet, there are two main categories of groups, of populations, of societies. Individualistic societies and collectivistic societies. America and England and a lot of sort of European countries, they tend to be classed as individualistic societies, where people are encouraged to seek their own careers, to seek their independence, to get their own homes, to not even try to get into relationships until you're too old to properly maybe I should stop talking there. I'm getting a bit controversial there. But people are encouraged to wait before getting into relationships and connect with other people. And because we end up being so individualistic, we then find it hard to live in unity with another human being when we do get into romantic relationships or friendships, because we're very individualistic. That's a problem. I've been lucky to have lived in a collectivistic society and country for, well, not for long, but long enough to understand the differences between collectivistic and individualistic societies. In a collectivistic society, you do what's right for the family or for the relationship. If you're in a relationship with somebody, you tend not to do what is best just for yourself, but for everybody. Collectivistic societies, even though they're put down a lot by people in individualistic societies, they're more considerate to other people than the more sort of individualistic, selfish approach to a lot of Western or European societies. But anyway, that's what a collective is. And when you have a collective, then you can, when you have a spiritual collective, your spirits can do more than just connect. Your spirits can start to overlap with each other. They can start to merge into each other in a way that your consciousnesses, the consciousnesses of the people in the collective or the beings in the collective, are able to feel each other's emotions and access each other's consciousnesses. Thoughts, feelings, memories, knowledge, and personal consciousness characteristics become felt and known to everyone in the collective. Such consciousness collectives tend to be very harmonious and efficient. The term collective consciousness refers to a collection of consciousnesses functioning as one. We're not talking about consciousnesses. Now we're talking about consciousness, a collective consciousness. All of the members of a collective consciousness have achieved such unity with each other, that they collectively function as an individual super consciousness. Such phenomena occur towards the top end of the connection scale. During contact events, I have connected with collective consciousnesses. Now, they aren't gods, but they're so much more advanced than we are that their presences feel to me a little bit like, if I were to guess what a god might feel like, their presences feel a little bit godlike, with enormous levels of harmony and love and benevolence. At the very top of the connection scale, and this is not something that has happened yet, but I'm just sort of extending that scale to its ultimate point. The very top of the connection scale would be a collective consciousness in which every single consciousness in the universe were fully unified with each other. Imagine that. Such a collective would be the ultimate universal collective super consciousness. Can you imagine the universe where every single consciousness within it is connected in a way that they're unified? They can feel each other's consciousnesses and they can work in a unified collectivistic way where they all care about each other and they all work for the common good. If anybody's interested in that sort of idea, read Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. There's several books in his series, and I think it's the last of his Foundation books, probably Forward the Foundation. But in that book, they go to a planet which is a collective consciousness. And it's not a whole universe, but it's very interesting to see the progression through his books, where there is a psychic link made between individuals getting stronger and stronger and branching outwards to the point where a whole planet, like the concept of Gaia, a whole planet can be a living, single, collective consciousness. Well, I have enjoyed talking to you today. I hope you've got something out of my conversation, or monologue, more like, about consciousness. I would like to wish you all peace, love, and happiness. You will take care. Enjoy the rest of your weeks. Goodbye for now.